Hello everyone, and thank you for joining me. Today we'll be talking about the creation of the first empire of man in Tamriel, the land upon which many of you may have explored over the years. Long ago, before the time of man, a race of elves known as Aldmer ruled over the Somerset Isles. They claim that they themselves migrated from a different continent to the south, but the facts are difficult to find. Imperial scholar Phrastus of Elenhir wrote in the 500th year of the Second Era that the Aldmer were the first people in Tamriel to organize worship of both the Aedra, Elven for our ancestors, and the Daedra, Elven for not our ancestors. While mainstream Aldmer society ostracized the worship of the Daedra, many continued in secret. Following the writings and journey of legendary Aldmeri explorer Topal the Pilot, splinter factions split off from Elven society and struck out into Tamriel to make lives for themselves. Some went for riches, many went to worship Daedra in secret. Aldmer who left the Somerset Isles eventually changed over time. Through biological and cultural evolution, Aldmer who lived in the mighty jungles of Valenwood became the Bosmer, the Wood Elves. Morrowind was colonized by factions who would become the Dwemer and the Chimer, with other groups eventually becoming the Maumr, the Orsimer, and the Falmer. But I'm not going to be talking about any of those today. I'll be talking about one group in particular. In their own language, they called themselves the Aelids. They were the Heartland High Elves, the Heartland referring to the imperial province of today, Cyrodiil. In Morrowind, the Chimer began to worship the Daedra, however, they did so in a much different way than their Aelid cousins. Where the Chimer made distinct the good and bad roles of Daedric influences, the Aelid reveled in both. Aelid cruelty was known all too well by the Nedic people. The Needs were a group of proto-humans who migrated from Atmora, far to the north of Skyrim, where they propagated and spread across Tamriel. It was then that their systematic enslavement by the Aelid began. While some of the Aelid sects worshipped the Aedra, the majority worshipped the Daedric princes of Oblivion, especially those princes whose fears included slavery, cruelty, domination, torture, and suffering. Phrastus of Elenhir asserts that the human revulsion for Daedra and Daedric worship today is a direct result of the Aelid treatment of the Nedic peoples. The Nedic people were subject to magical torture and generations of slavery. The Aelid had a deep-rooted contempt for their slaves. Imperial Chancellor Abner Tharn of the Second Era wrote that the debauched elves were creative when it came to dreaming up new horrors to inflict on their slaves. The Aelid inflicted horrors upon their slaves so as to please their Daedric masters, and were rewarded with mighty armies of demons and spirits. Tharn proposed that their rise to power and their downfall were both due to Daedric worship, as the Daedra offer power at a terrible price. The history of Tamriel is the history of heroic deeds and legendary quests. No deeds were greater than that of the three leaders of the revolt against the Aelid people. The rebellion began with a woman, perhaps the greatest woman to ever live. She was known as Paravania to her lover Morahouse, but had many names. Many knew her as Paravant in her day. Later, she would be widely known as Saint Alessia. Alessia was raised in the Aelid city of Sard, now known as Sardavar Lid. Sard was widely known for its systemic program of herding in all manner of humans and breeding them for a lifetime of slavery and labor. The Adabal is an ancient First-Era text traditionally believed to have been the memoirs of Morahouse, the lover of Alessia and one of her generals, although the authenticity of where this document came from is admittedly difficult to prove. According to the Adabala, men were not only subject to the moving of stones and the draining of fields, they were also subject to artistic torture in the form of flesh sculpturing, gut gardens, and acts I would not dare speak of in polite company. Alessia was understandably horrified by the treatment of humanity and wanted change. She took to prayer, for she believed in the power of the Aedra. She prayed to Akatosh, the mighty dragon god of time. Akatosh is the king of all spirits and the father of the divines. It is said that Akatosh took pity on the plight of Alessia and humanity, and he answered her prayers in the form of 3 visions given to her in the city of Sankar-Tor. The details of these visions is sadly lost to time. We do know that her prayers were answered, and her faith grew stronger than ever. She established Sankar-Tor as her holy city and began the revolt against her former masters in earnest. It is unknown how Alessia and Morahouse, a half-bull demigod, joined forces, but it is known that through the combined strength of both of them, they managed to raise an army of slaves against the Aelids. Many believe this would have been the end for the rebellion if it weren't for 2 important factors. Many sects of Daedra worshippers were actively undermining each other in the demonic armies of the Aelid military, and Aelid kings that followed Akatosh and all Aedra joined forces with the Alessians. It was then that we know Alessia's visions came true. Pellinal Whitestrake revealed himself to the hero queen of mankind. Little is known of Pellinal, I will admit. A manuscript was compiled for the Imperial Library early in the Second Era, a compilation of much earlier texts that are almost impossible to date. Known as the Riemann manuscript, this manuscript tells of the appearance of Pellinal, a diamond soaked red with the blood of elves, who could form and unform into a man whose every angle could cut her slavers. That diamond was Pellinal, the star-made knight, who was arrayed in armor made in a future time, who carried weapons soaked in the blood and viscera of slain elves. Pellinal was an expert in personal combat, while he ignored the strategy of a campaign. He left the revolt in the capable hands of Alessia and Morahouse, while he actively sought out Aeliad kings, princes, generals, and nobles, and challenged them to one-on-one combat. It is the opinion of many scholars that Pellinal Whitestrake is a Chezarine, some sort of hero oft recurring in times of need. Two pieces of evidence greatly support this. One, the aforementioned manuscript made note of his armor and that it was of a, quote, future time, as well as an incident where, locked in a duel with an elf called Haramir of Copper and Tea at the holy city of Sancretor, Pellinal was overheard by many screaming praise to Riemann while eating the neck veins of the elf. Riemann Cyrodiil would forge the Riemann dynasty in the Second Empire of Man, some 2,000 years later. With the combined might of Pellinal, Morahouse, rebel Aeliads, and even mercenaries from Skyrim, Alessia was able to push the Aeliad forces all the way to the Imperial City itself before encircling it and totally cutting it off from the rest of Cyrodiil. Pellinal, frustrated with the hesitation of Alessia's armies, took matters into his own hands and entered the city alone. Pellinal was soon locked into a fateful battle with Umaril the Unfeathered, an Aeliad sorcerer king. Accounts of this day differ, but many believe Pellinal was wounded Umaril before he was defeated himself and sliced into 8 pieces. The next day, Morahouse, Alessia, and their forces stormed the white gold tower that lies at the center of the Imperial City and claimed it for their own. The remaining Aeliads either fled or swore fealty to Empress Alessia. Those that swore fealty were those that had already worshipped the Aedra, and those that fled to High Rock in Valenwood. When Alessia claimed the white gold tower, she forged the first empire of man on the face of Tamriel. But her story does not end there. No one knew of the horror of the Daedra better than humanity. There are many versions of Alessia's pact and conversation with Akatosh once she became queen. I'll share one version and stick to the facts that persist in most tellings. According to the manuscript fragment known as Of the Dragonfires, Alessia said to Akatosh, quote, "Though we have overthrown the wicked elves, we fear they will afflict us with oblivion. Forever did they traffic with the Daedric lords, to our sorrow and misery. Mighty are we in arms, but the greater demons are beyond our strength." The specifics of their dialogue and agreement are the subject of hearty debate in the Imperial Library. What we do know is this: Alessia feared the Daedra. Akatosh understood this fear, and proclaimed Alessia Saint Alessia. Akatosh drew from his breast a handful of his heart's blood in the form of the Amulet of Kings and gave it to the warrior queen. According to the Trials of Saint Alessia, whose author is lost to time, Akatosh said, quote, "This shall also be a token to you of our joined blood and pledged faith. So long as you and your descendants shall wear the Amulet of Kings, then shall this dragon fire burn, an eternal flame, as a sign to all men and gods of our faithfulness. So long as the dragon fire shall burn, to you and to all generations, I swear that my heart's blood shall hold fast the gates of oblivion." As long as a rightful dragon-born ruler sat upon the throne, humanity would never again be threatened by the forces of oblivion. We know that in the final days of the Third Era, the covenant was broken by humanity, and the jaws of oblivion opened upon Tamriel. However, the final days of the Third Era is a story far removed from the life of Saint Alessia, a slave, a warrior, a queen. Alessia rose up against her masters in rebellion, and through the aid of the dragon god of time, was able to drive out the elves from what would eventually become known as Cyrodiil, and forge the first empire of man. She created a new temple structure that combined the Aedric gods of the Aldmer with the human gods of the Nords. Her new temple was known as the Eight Divines. The Eight Divines would be a legacy perhaps more important than that of the temple, than that of the empire itself. Hey everybody, thanks for listening. Let me know what you thought down in the comments below. Feel free to leave any feedback or suggestions for future videos. If you've got any questions about Elder Scrolls lore, I'd love to give a shot at answering them. I'll see y'all next time and have a great day.